Hi, Tori. Hi, Emily. I'm doing the question formulation technique by the Wright Institute or Wright Question Institute with my class. They're in the background, so you might hear them. We are going to review some of the work that they've already done in class and then develop a question based on some new information that we received. So as a little bit of background, we started with, in September, we started looking at the changing climate and we identified some interests that they had, which was to learn more about water levels, um, some literature, what people back then had to say about climate change, look at art, what a picture can say about climate change and how to stop climate change. The specific concerns that the students have are water rising, fires rapidly spreading, warmer weather, making ice melt, animals like polar bears and walrus involved in climate change. So after we identified interests and concerns, we started talking about what we noticed. So what the students noticed is that there was what we noticed or what we know that there's rising water and the ground is eroding and the weather is changing. So after we identified those three concerns, we talked more about it. And what rising water was the concern and notice is that it was taking away land. Also considered erosion at seawall where there's no there is erosion at Shishmaref where there was no seawall. And they also noticed that more ice is melting and then more animals are going to die, like the polar bears and the walrus. And then the ground is eroding and from rising water, from water rising. And then about the weather is changing every year. Summer came and went late. So that was the end of that round. We talked more. So what does this mean about the rising waters? I already mentioned specifically taking away land. There's erosion at Shishmaref, especially where there's no seawall. And for about the animals dying, the students recognize that polar bears need ice and that the walrus are swimming more. For the ground eroding, they notice that's happening at the dump road and the ground is missing at the Initek or our meat drying racks and also the water rising. So for the weather is changing and how summer came and went, how they noticed that is that winter stayed longer and they noticed more snow. And they also noticed that it was more windy and rainy, and they could remember about 5 sunny days after the summer. So after that second round of talking more about what they notice, more specifically about what they notice, what it looks like, they developed questions. So questions they had about rising water is why is it rising? How long will it take for um, how long will it take for the land at Kikiktak or Shishmaref to erode? And the second question, how much does the weather change each year? Why did winter stay longer this year? And then for the, let's see, ground eroding, does the type of ground or how is the type of ground affected erosion? So let me back up on that a second. The original question here in purple was, does the type of ground affect erosion? So we recognize that that was a closed question that could be answered with yes or no. So we talked about how could we rewrite the question so that it requires research. And so the students helped rewrite the question to read, how is the type of ground affected by erosion? So that's how we use this question formulation technique in the past. We had this information, we've done some observations, and so now we're looking at what I should say is the students ranked their concerns. So 1 was rising water, 2 is weather is changing, and 3 is ground is eroding. So we worked on number 1 and number 2 concern the best that we could on our own in the classroom. Number 3 is the ground is eroding and the questions required us to go outside of our classroom. And so we called in our research partner, Bessie, to review with the work that we had done already. And so she came in and the students gave their presentation to her and their general classroom. And they had the discussion about sea level rise and erosion. So what they found during sea level rise, talking about their concerns and what they were interested in, they decided that the best way to monitor sea level rise would be to put a post and measure before and after the storms. And they located or identified the ocean side and the lagoon side as the best places to put post. For erosion, the first round, they noticed erosion at the Initak, which are the meat drying racks, the store, in front of the store, and at the old tannery. They noticed that more erosion at fall time, and they suggested a metal pole with the buoy would be the best type of post to use for measuring. So digging deeper, we talked about specifically where, and then it wasn't quite clear where the old tannery was. So the students identified that it's the edge of the seawall. It's a two-story building at the edge of the seawall on the east side of town. And they just decided for monitoring, like I said, the metal pole with the buoy, and to check it daily and at high tides. They also suggested, the students also suggested, pay attention to changes, landfall in the rocks. Well, pay attention to changes. So land falling in, rocks falling in, the changes with the pole that should be installed, and then notice changes and things that are disappearing. So that's where we're at. That's based on our last meeting together. And so our natural follow-up to that is to identify the specific questions based on what our partner and their classmates had said. So at this point, you'll start hearing the students stating their concerns, issues, understandings, and developing questions. All right, so your whole class is interested in sea level rise and erosion. What are your thoughts about putting the post at, or putting post at the ocean and the lagoon and measuring before and after the storms? What are your thoughts on that? Agree or disagree?
Agree. Agree.
All right, are there specific reasons why you agree?
Like it becomes like really, really high tide, the buoy will be like. It depends where you put the buoy though.
But what do you like about putting the post and measuring before and after storms? What would that really, really high tide? Why would that really, really high tide and the buoy be important?
To see how much water.
Okay, so we'll put that to see how much water
See how much water like rose up onto the land and like.
So to see how much water goes onto the land and,
If the land was.
okay, and if the land is affected. Okay, so that's one reason why we agree with putting a post to measure before and after storms. What else?
Yeah.
Okay. Just to be clear, see how high what gets? The water? Okay, so to see how high the water gets, to see how much goes onto the land, what about you? Are you thinking anything about why you're especially excited about measuring before and after storms? Okay. So we have all of this information. Did these feel like, how could we turn these interests into questions? So we want to see how much water goes onto the land and if the land is affected. So how can we turn that into a question?
Where on the land is it most affected?
Okay. Okay. So when we have this question alone, where on the land is it most affected? We know that we're talking about sea level rise, but how can we put that into the question? What's doing the, what part of this question is sea level? Where on the land is it most affected? By sea level rise? Would that be? Where on the land is it most affected by sea level rise? I think that was the only one that was. I couldn't think of a place where to pop in sea level. So to see how high the water gets, how can we turn that into a question? And I'm just gonna put this over. So these are related to sea level rise. All right, to see how high the water gets, how could we turn that into a question? What's the average sea level? That's something we want to know. How else could we turn to see how high the water gets into a question? We could, it starts with how high the water gets. So how could we turn how high the water gets into a question? How high will the water get? How high, let's see, let's put it here. How high, if we go like this, how high will the water get? How high will the water get? How high will the water get? To see how high the water gets, to see how high the water gets, how high will the water get? So put the post to see how high will the water get? Final answer? Final answer to the question?
So highest and lowest.
How high will the water get? And then I heard, what is the highest and lowest what?
Highest and lowest.
Hmm? What is the highest and lowest heights?
Yeah.
Okay. What made you think about tides?
Are extremely low tide this week.
Okay, so 10, what day did that start?
It was like, so
Today is the 14th.
yesterday,
Friday was the 11th.
maybe Friday.
So starting October 11th, there were extremely low tides this week. All right, so what are we thinking about our questions? Where on the land is it most affected by sea level rise? What is the average sea level? How high will the water get? What is the highest and lowest tides based on the extremely low tide we had this week? All right. So do these questions reflect your concerns about sea level rise? While you're thinking about that, I'm going to get another paper. So if we go back to your concerns that the water is rising and the water is rising, it's taking away land, erosion at Shishmaref. Do those help answer the questions that are related to your concerns? Okay, and then just to double check, because normally we start with the questions and then we talk about how we'll monitor them. Since you workshopped your questions, where on the land is it most affected by sea level rise? What is the average sea level? What is the average sea level? How high will the water get? What is the highest and lowest tides? Does it seem like putting the post will be all we need to do? Putting the post and checking it daily or at high tides? Does that seem like that'll be enough monitoring or how a good way to monitor to answer your questions?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go through. The post will answer where it's most affected by sea level rise. But where? Where is where? Where are we checking?
We were talking about earlier by maybe the Anita,
The Anytad? West or east?
west, since it's closer to school.
Toward the dump? Okay, so west Anytad. Where else? You'd mentioned the store and Old Tannery.
Time is kind of far away.
What do you think? So let me, before I ask about, okay, so West Anytech, how often would you want to go there? Before and after storms?
Yeah,
Okay, what about store?
there's seawall, so
So store,
yeah,
yes, at the store because of the seawall?
maybe we could like measure any rock, like what Bessie said, we can measure like any rock.
Okay,
If they tell, or
okay, so measuring rocks will be different than using that pole. So where else would you like to put the pole? To,
or, and
do you agree or disagree? How come? How come? There is one concern that it's far. How come you agree? Especially as it relates to these questions.
Because there's no seawall there.
Okay, so since there's no seawall, it makes it extra important. All right. What is the average sea level? Does that seem like a question that the poll will answer? How?
is it just gonna be one pole or is there gonna be like two poles?
You'll have a pole at the West Inetuck and the Old Tannery.
So, and write down the data and find the average.
Okay. Right data, find average.
And if they do a project in the future, they could look back onto our data and see how it differs from the future and the past.
Okay. So I'm writing data valuable to future. Okay, how high will the water get? What is the highest and lowest tides? Will that poll, does it seem like the poll will help answer that? All right. So that's sea level rise. Let me look at our erosion questions. Why, oh, that's why is it rising? How long will it take for the land up to erode? And does the type of ground affect erosion? So ground is eroding. I'm gonna write that. So erosion. Erosion, the original question that you have, how is the type of ground affected by erosion? How is the type of ground affected by erosion? So that was the original question. Thinking back to your meeting with our research partner and your classmates, what other questions can we write down about erosion? There's our original question. What other questions can we write down about erosion? Anything goes. Whatever you're thinking. Based on what you're interested in, concerned about, and what you heard your classmates interested in and concerned about. And Bessie.
How long,
Any questions? Good, don't have to think careful.
how long would it take to see the effects of
Do you see the effects of erosion? To the A, F, or E? Effects. Okay, how long? Oh, how long it would it, I added an extra. How long would it take to see the effects of erosion? What else?
Sign off.
Will we lose? What else?
the difference between one part of the island compared to the other?
What is the difference? What other questions? Kaja?
Those are-
Okay, how is the type of ground affected by erosion? So what kind of information do we need to answer this question?
What are the different types of?
Okay. Okay. Good for that? Or can you think of more? How is the type of ground affected by erosion? What are the different types of ground?
Does it matter how much ground?
How much ground what?
How much ground? Like a hill compared to.
A hill compared to like what could you see?
Like where there's sand and then like a little bit of ground and then concrete.
Like a dune? Like a hill or a dune compared to what?
Compared to
What's it look like?
like there's a beach and then there's like a little like ground right here and then and the ground continues.
Okay, so hill, dune, how about a bank?
Yeah.
Like Inita? A bank compared to sand, like when we could see the soil, the berries and the soil and then the sand underneath, sometimes there's logs and whatnot. Okay, so does it matter how much ground? And that goes into like learning that different type of ground, right? So the more we learn, the more we'll understand. How long would it take to see the effects of erosion? What do we need to answer that question?
That
Okay, can you think of where or what kind? You know what I'm thinking? I'm thinking this is a good question to partner with the scientist, to let them know what we're concerned about and have a discussion with them. And if we share that question with them and that we know we need data, see what advice they can give us. How's that sound? Okay, how much land will we lose? What would the answer to this question look like? Is this a closed or an open question? Is it a short answer or a long answer? How much land will we lose?
I mean, it depends on how much time are we talking about.
How come?
Like 50 years compared to 100 years, that's gonna be a big difference.
Okay, so time is missing from the question.
Yeah.
So how much land will we lose over time? And I think your brain kind of skipped ahead because I had asked, is it an open or a closed question? Is it a short answer or a long answer? And I think, what did your mind decide? Huh? Yeah, you recognize that at first it was a short answer. And so your mind added words to make it a long answer. Do you agree or disagree? Okay.
Isn't that what we did for the type of ground?
Pretty much. So how much land will we lose over time? And then that changes it because we could say a short answer. What's an example of a short answer? How much land will we lose? What's an example of a short answer?
50 feet.
50 feet. What's another example of a short answer? None. So this over time makes us work harder and think more. Agree? Disagree? Okay. What is the difference between one part of the island and the other? Short answer or long answer? Is it a yes or a no? Or can we answer it with one short number like 50 or is this already a long answer?
That's kind of a,
What do you guys think?
Um,
How about you? What is the difference between one part of the island and another? Would it be a short answer or a long answer? Yes or no or longer? You think it's kind of short? Like, what would the answer look like? What would the short answer look like? Just feels like it? Okay,
the,
the,
the more that you think about it, like. Cause we have so much parts of land that's. Like affected by erosion, like that part gets affected differently than this part. And since we have the ocean and the lagoon,
mm-hmm,
then you can see what parts of the lagoon like gets affected the most, what parts of the ocean gets affected the most.
and then what parts of the ocean? How do you like those questions? Do those feel shorter or longer? Longer, you like them? Okay, so do we feel like we know what we're gonna do next? All right. Teku,